We've had now a look inside the long-term as well as the short-term reality in Singapore, which is a fantastic environment to explore all of those challenges that we're going to face. And interoperability, as Mr. Tan was saying in the last slide, is really one of those challenges that cuts across all of the discussion that we're going to have. So let me invite the panelists to come up, and I'll introduce the session leader. If you'll join us here, those of you who are part of the Smart City Pain Point in Energy panel, let me introduce first, why did we pick energy as the starting point for us to dive in a little deeper? We thought that it's important for us to keep in mind that this is a multi-industry, right? Multi-trillions of dollars of value already invested, multiple hundreds of thousands of actors on the stage, the utilities who generate and distribute power, and of course multiple technologies and multiple standards. And to guide us today and to guide this panel, we have Mr. Richard Schomburg, who's joined us from Paris. He's Vice President for Smart Energy Standards at EDF, Electricité de France, and has been active in building the global standards for the energy industry for, I guess, more decades than he would like to advertise.
30 decades.
30 decades, no, 3 decades.
I'm young.
He's a young man starting his career here with us. So thank you, Richard, and please welcome our panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, Gordon, for your nice introductory words. So I'd like, of course, first to introduce Dr. Cicelo Zulu, who is Managing Director at City Power in Johannesburg. And I'll introduce Dr. Yoshiaki Ishikawa, who is Chief Engineer at Hitachi in charge of smart communities infrastructure.
Yes.
And Mr. John Smichiklas, I did it right?
Very good. Close enough.
Who actually, it's very interesting, he is a Director for Energy at the Building Owners Association in Canada out of Toronto. So please join me to welcome our panelists here today. So we're going to have actually a conversation. There is no formal presentation here. I think what's interesting is to actually benefit from the experience and perspective of this unique panel that has been gathered here for you. And we're going to deal with energy. And what's interesting maybe first is, of course, to characterize what is special regarding energy in smart cities, because energy is not new. A lot of people have been working on energy, talking about energy in many, many different organizations. But we are talking about energy here in a very, very special context, which is the smart city. So what is special? What is special? First, I think it was well characterized by Franz Rizvik, showing that energy is needed everywhere. What you would think of, whatever you think of in a city, you need energy. You need energy to power transportation, but also to light, heat the homes and businesses, but also to pump water, process the food we eat. And of course, for anything about e-citizens, e-health, e-security. So we very often talk about smart cities as a group of verticals, you see, thinking about the infrastructure or how they've been designed. You see, you have verticals. You have energy vertical, transportation. You have the water. You have the e-health, e-security, etc. So what is special is first that energy is needed for all the verticals. The second key idea is that talking about energy means actually talking about electricity, which is a kind of a magic vector. It's very interesting, electricity, but of course it comes also with its constraints. But we're not talking about electricity only. what's interesting in a city is to actually bank on the benefits of combination of energies, where you have electricity, but you have gas also. And actually, you can use gas sometimes easier for heating, for example, because it's not easy to use gas to power a computer, right? But of course, it's very interesting because depending on the usage you have, you might choose one energy or another. And that's the beauty of smart cities, where you have many possibilities all together, easy to reach. So definitely it's electricity, plus the interactions with the gas, plus interactions with gas, because you can generate gas from electricity, and actually you can generate electricity from gas. And last but not the least, it's about heat, where it's very interesting to be able to store energy as heat in buildings, for example. And so basically when we're talking about energy in the smart cities, and I would use the definition of the term of smart energy, it's really this combination of smart electric grid plus the interactions with gas plus the interaction with heat, hot and cold. So that's really the second special thing about energy in smart cities. And third, but not the least, you see, what's very interesting is that when you go around, when you talk to people that are tackling smart cities, basically they first try to optimize what's going on in one vertical by massively injecting ICT. And I think Director Tan made a very good description of the capabilities now that are brought forward thanks to the Moore's Law. And of course, you want to optimize what's going on in each of the verticals. But what's very interesting and very special with the smart cities is that all those verticals are so close to each other that actually there are a lot of benefits that you can grab by synergies in between the verticals. And this is quite new. This is challenging. There are huge opportunities. There are also huge challenges. And I hope that through the discussion, we will actually address those different aspects and that we will be able to show and demonstrate that there is this huge value, actually, in looking for synergies in between all those verticals, at least regarding energy, because that's the theme of our panel. So I would like to start the discussion here by looking at all those questions from the utility perspective. And we have the chance here to have Mr. Zulu with us, who is Managing Director of a utility. And of course, the key question we have is how come you can, at the same time, manage short-term goals, basically ensuring performance, the everyday, the day-after-day performance, and at the same time prepare for the future when there are so many unknown, right? And actually the customers are expecting available power 24/7. And they have very high expectations. And power is not just general, you see. There is also the characteristic, the quality of power is getting more and more important because there are more and more sensitive loads, right? And of course also in the cities, because everything is so close to each infrastructure or so close to each other, that you can generate also some annoyance to other infrastructure. Per se, there are some pollution, electrical pollution possible to other infrastructure for telecommunications, for example. So how do you see growing the pain points in the urban areas?
No, thanks, Richard. Maybe just to correct you, I'm not a doctor yet.
Well, you are for me, so please. And we'll see how the jury decides at the end of the panel. Please.
No, thanks. But maybe just to create some context, I think it's very important especially for those that are not familiar with South Africa. It's on the southern tip of Africa, and it consists of about 9 provinces or states, if you want to call it. And Johannesburg is really situated in the Gauteng province, which is an economic hub of South Africa. So Joburg, if you look at its contribution to the country as a whole, it contributes about 16% really of the GDP in terms of South Africa. So it's quite key. And if you look at the province itself, it contributes about 40% of the economic activities in that particular area. So it's really quite key. But just to get to your question, of which I think it's important, if you look at the pain points really that we're currently facing, I'll probably highlight just the 2 major ones, which have been highlighted as well as part of the introduction in terms of the presentation. I think the first one is obviously the issue of densification. Within the cities. I think it's been mentioned that we're having about the in-migration in most of the cities. And again, if you look at the energy, probably about 70%, I think it's been mentioned by France. That's where you obviously get the utilization. So I think Johannesburg is not unique in a way. We also faced with that particular challenge, I think, for instance. But the second one, you're looking at the areas, for instance, where there's no infrastructure at all. We still have, as a developing country, some of the areas where there's no electricity. So therefore, we need to strike a balance in terms of moving towards being smart, but also making sure that you're actually covering those areas that are without electricity within the country. So just in terms of the numbers, if you look at the densification in terms of the numbers, for instance, according to the census for 2011, over a 10-year period, what we've seen is the population growth of about 37%. I mean, that's huge, just in a period of 10 years. So you can imagine that, the pressure that exerts on the infrastructure that already needs strengthening, but in some of the cases where you have some of the customers without electricity, if you want to put it that way, or the citizens rather. So that's a huge challenge. But secondly, we have dealt with the issues around, making sure that we provide infrastructure to some of the commercial and industrial customers, for instance, so that we balance the economic activities, I think, within the country as the economic hub of South Africa. So what we've picked up is that although we're trying very hard to apply some of the energy efficiency programs, for instance, to make sure that we actually get our customers into the grid, but at the same time make sure that they're efficient. We've seen really from 2008 about 10% sort of like decline in terms of the sales, for instance. But when you look at the peak demand, which is actually critical in terms of the investment, we've seen very marginal, I think, decline there, about 1%. So it continues to be a challenge, I think, for us to be able to provide that electricity and to share out on this infrastructure that we have, I think, as the city, to both those that don't have access to electricity, but at the same time to those that needs to grow so that we support the economy of the country.
So congratulations, because succeeding to actually have a decrease of 10% of the electricity delivered is really commendable as an energy efficiency promotion and program. And of course, what you are explaining is that it's not just about the quantity of energy that is sold, it's also a lot about the peak demand.
Yes.
The peak demand is basically the size of the pipes, right? And the energy sold is the kind of the flow that we can have going through the pipes. So the issue, what I understand, is despite efforts regarding energy efficiency, okay, you get some response, but it seems that it's very difficult to have an impact on the size of the pipes or the peak power. And unfortunately, this is one of the most costly thing as an investment and as maintenance, because you need to put in place very, very big pipes, right? And they might not be used all the time up to the maximum, so it's not optimal. So this is an interesting thing where we need to think, of course, about energy efficiency as the quantity of energy that is used. We need to make progress about how we can improve what we call the load factor, which is this capability to use at best, at any time, the existing capacity that is deployed.
Certainly, I think initially, obviously, it was about just applying some of the demand-side management initiatives.
Yep.
But what we're currently doing to try and deal with that issue of the peak demand, because you can obviously try and invest in the infrastructure, I think, all the time, and it's really what I normally say to my staff is that it's like really, buying bigger clothes to resolve the issue of obesity, which is a problem. So
which we all know. Yeah.
So what we're then obviously trying to do is that we were fortunate enough that we're hit by the sector of supply issues as well around, say, 2011 and 2012. I'm sure you're aware of the load shedding that we had to go through. So what we then did, we then applied some of the initiatives around load limiting, where we started to control some of the flexible loads during the peak period, especially in the evening, for instance, to try and avoid load shedding. So those are some of the elements that we had to put in place, which I think is very innovative to achieve that through smart metering, for instance, and that's what we started doing. But also, we started looking at some of the microgrids, especially in the informal settlement areas where there's no electricity at all, and we started moving towards applying those microgrids where we're using the photovoltaic PV and a bit of storage as well, and the INTR lending inverters, and actually feeding back into the grid in some of the areas where we've got grid actually available to try and balance the load, especially during the peak hours. So those are some of the initiatives that we're starting to put in place as we speak, so that we try and alleviate the problem and balance the capital investment from the infrastructure upgrade point of view versus the demand side management in applying some of the smart initiatives at that level.
So basically today there are technologies that allows actually to be implemented to help in improving this overall load factor, or let's say this overall investment for the benefits of the community. But of course the key question is to decide where at best deploying this technology. And I think also, as the Director Tan presented, it's very interesting to leverage all the data that is available to pinpoint, find out actually what could be done where, and defining, making sure we know where we want to go actually in a smart city. The key question is not just about finding technologies that would do. It's actually first making some decisions on goals, on KPIs you want to achieve. And this is maybe the most difficult thing to achieve. And maybe also, I guess, that in cities like Singapore, which is a city and a state, it might be easier also to make decisions because the size and the setting is such that you can have all the constituents maybe easier, in an easier manner at the same table to run the discussion and to come up with those decisions. Because basically in the smart cities, and at least I'm going to speak for energy, but I'm sure it's not different for other verticals, the main issue is who is the customer of something. Who you should talk to decide something and make happen something. So I guess there is an advantage in the case of a smart nation like Singapore, or as a governor one presented for Jeju Island also, you see, to maybe be in position to choose KPIs, make decisions quickly. But then, actually, it's very important to find out, to have a plan and play the cards. We're adding the right technology at the right place. But actually, what you explained is that it's not just about technology. As you mentioned, it's interesting also to leverage, including the citizens, in the control loop, right?
So
because you can come up with any program. You see, you need to play all the cards. It's not just about technology.
No, certainly it's not.
So how do you see engaging the citizens to improve the load factor?
The lessons that we've learned, I think, especially in the smart meter deployment, for instance, if you look at most of these technologies that we're talking about, they actually require a positive response from the citizen. So if you're going to go ahead of yourself as a utility, you will obviously have missed the boat. So it's not really about really deploying the technology. So therefore, I think if you look at what Singapore has done, I think they've really invested a lot in actually understanding the market. So they've done the market research and understanding the citizens. I think for each and every city, for them to become smart. I think that's a good starting point in terms of education, for instance, in terms of making sure that you do extensive market research to understand what the customer wants or what the customer needs, and therefore be able to then deploy some of the technologies that will talk to that. I'll give you some of the examples, for instance, that we have gone through as part of our smart metering deployment as well, within the city of Johannesburg. We thought it would be easy just to go to each and every household within the city of Johannesburg and be able to install a meter. But it wasn't that easy. You need to consider your accesses, and for instance, your security, and et cetera, and also the customer acceptance, as an example. So we have to go through that, particular ordeal to make sure that we're able to then get the maximum penetration in terms of the smart metering, for instance. But it doesn't end there. So once you've got the infrastructure there, you still need to interact for them to be able to understand the power of the smart metering that they obviously have within their home, and how best can that be utilized from the energy management point of view, as an example. So certainly it's not about just providing electricity to a passive, inelastic, customer. Customers now, they're very obviously, so involved.
And is the motivation that you're able to trigger only based on the price?
Certainly. I think if you look at what we've done, for instance, in terms of understanding some of the, our customer segment, especially in a developing country, which is very critical. I think it's very important to understand some of the socioeconomic, requirements. Like, for instance, we've got within one country an affluent customer, which is in the first world, but also you've got a customer that is actually low cost that cannot afford. So how do you then close that particular gap in making sure that when you start pricing your infrastructure, for instance, in terms of the supply of electricity, caters for that wide range of customers? So those are some of the things that we have to consider. For instance, we have to come up with a tariff that accommodates the poorest of the poor in terms of the lifeline, whilst we have to also structure a tariff that talks to industrial, commercial, and affluent areas within the same sort of like city.
So actually we were talking about energy and mainly electricity, and just within the vertical of electricity. But do you have any examples where you've been able to exercise synergies in between different resources?
No, certainly. I think it's important that you actually look at, you cut across all the verticals for you to be able to actually deliver energy into the city. I'll give you one example, some of the things that we've done. We actually had to visit, one of the states in the U.S. and partnered with Lucid Energy, for instance, where we're now using water, to actually generate electricity from the in-pipe turbines, for instance. While then water is achieving its pressure management, we're actually getting electricity from that particular environment. So we have to consider
those. And that's the water for drinking.
Yeah, that's water for drinking.
Yeah.
So you'll find that the water distribution, you have to do pressure management, and you achieve that obviously through making sure that you dissipate some of the energy. So what we've done, we've actually stick in the turbine there, and as they do water pressure management, we actually get energy from there. So it's important that you actually cut across in terms of assessing your infrastructure and where you can be able to get some of the distributed generation, for instance. In terms of our landfill sites, we're mining the methane gas, we're converting that to energy, for instance. So I think it becomes critical that as you plan your infrastructure, and the delivery of the energy to the citizens, you actually cut across and you look at some of the, I'm sure the other cities are obviously doing exactly the same, but I think it's important that that gets to be considered within your journey map in terms of delivering energy into the future, especially looking at the smarter way of doing it in the cities, considering the challenges that we currently have.
Yeah, those are excellent examples showing that actually there is no limit to synergies we can find out. And I guess this is where we're going to see major innovations. That's a holy grail, I think, for startup company today to actually detect those new niches. And probably there will be avenues also to come up with some from some standards from ISO, IEC, and ITU, helping to actually deliver the full value to citizens, because of course when it's just a niche application, it's interesting for the startup company, but it does not easily benefit widely. Well, you see, and this is only when the standards can get in that the true international market can be revealed for a very good innovation. So I'd like now to move into a discussion about the energy efficiency. And actually, we started to have some points about, okay, what can you achieve regarding energy efficiency programs? But I think a key question is it more expensive to design a smart city that would be eco-efficient? You see, because it's always the same story. You go to decision makers and you say, you know what, let's run some new program. That's going to be fantastic, and we're going to have a lot of savings, and that's okay. But if I'm a decision maker, am I going to take some risk, and for what? And is it going to benefit the cities? So is it more expensive to design an eco-efficient city?
Okay. Actually, what I'm doing is a bit more focusing on the sustainability viewpoint to utilize smart city technology. So what we think smart city is, not a very happy city. And not only the happy, but it should keep the footprint within 1.0. We've already exceeded 1.0 footprint. You all know about that. And if we need to make ourselves happier, like especially developing countries, we need to, of course, apply high-tech. But at the same time, we utilize those high-tech in order to make eco-efficient, as you said. So that is the basic point of discussing the eco-efficiency. However, it's not so much easy, as you said.
Sure.
Some people may say it's expensive, right? Eco-efficient solution would be expensive. So what we've been doing is to publish guidelines, and success stories or best practices in terms of energy, in terms of water, in terms of transportation, and show the better way to move forward to achieve eco-efficiency. And eco-efficiency is the idea of balancing the quality of life and the sustainability at the same time. And I believe it does not necessarily mean expensive solutions. If you account for only 1 year starting point, it could be expensive, could be. But if you account for 10 years, 20, 30 years, as a life cycle cost, it won't be expensive, because if you make some pollution, for example, utilizing bad ways of technologies, the society will have to pay. It will be an external cost, not for internal cost of some company. But of course, the director of the city of Johannesburg, you knows it very well. Anybody, anyway, everybody has to pay. Yeah. And if you count all of this inclusive, in order to, for example, decide your investment, if you're an investment bank, World Bank, or JICA, whoever, to invest the development of developing countries, you should be more advised to think about the life cycle cost and including the social external cost as well into the balance sheet and determine which would be better. And I believe it's not so much expensive taking the approach or option of eco-efficient technology.
I see. So basically, is it more expensive to design an eco-efficient city? Yes, but no.
No.
Yes, because the initial investment might be a bit
higher.
more.
Sure.
But actually, you should not just think about the initial investment. You should think about the total cost of ownership and operation through the entire life cycle. But then the main issue that is raised is actually that very often it's not the one who invest that are grabbing the benefits. And then the issue is to very early on come up with a business model that will reward the investors and the one are taking risk properly. And you see, this is not a new problem, you see, and I think we need to tell the things as they are. You see, smart grid there was a big boom on smart grid in 2001, and a lot of expectations.
You were the center of this, right?
Well, thank you. One of those, and I would say I'm one of the culprits here because, and I don't know if my colleagues would say that as easily, but I would like that we acknowledge we need to be very humble, because when you look at what has been deployed on the ground, it's nothing compared to the expectation, the excitement, the money, even the money that has been invested and put on the table. So somehow there is a kind of, people are chasing after something else, kind of to forget that we did not achieve already for smart grid, and saying, you know what, now with smart cities it's going to work, it didn't work for smart grid. Well, possibly. But we have to learn from this. And why it did not deploy? It's basically because we did not resolve easily this question that we need to put in place a mechanism very early on to reward the one who's going to take the risk and that are investing. Otherwise, there is no way that people's going to invest. And that means that it's not just about finding the technologies. Of course, you need technologies. You need to have some feasible projects. But of course, you need to come up with a business model, but not just a business model to reward the one who are not actually taking the risk. And most importantly, you need to have the regulators on board. And regulators, I'm not bashing the regulators here. We need regulators. They represent the interest of the citizens. But they need to be convinced. And actually, if we don't have at the table those three, lining up at one point, nothing can really happen, and you cannot get really the full deployment we're looking for. So it's very interesting to know and refreshing to know that basically today we have on hand the guidelines. We have some success stories, and we have more and more technology.
Sure.
Right? So also, as you said, you're looking into a balance between quality of life and sustainability, but basically about sustainability. I was wondering that, you see, very often people say that if it's energy efficient, it's just that we're going to use less energy. But it doesn't mean it's sustainable. So what about moving from eco-efficiency to eco-effectiveness? Which is moving towards more regenerative forms of energy, or also recycling. For example, you see in the car manufacturing industry, it's very interesting because there are a lot of parts that requires a lot of energy to manufacture. And if you can actually reuse some parts and just remanufacture parts, you basically reuse energy. Huge amount of energy. So do you have examples of actually eco-effectiveness and how to go beyond just eco-efficiency, which would be just saving energy?
Okay, thanks, Richard. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation of what you have said. The reward business model has to come first, because without that, nobody will start doing anything. But maybe you already said what I was prepared to myself to say. The regulators or policy has to be involved. It's a big issue. Without the policy, nobody can act on the environment. I mean, environment is the condition for the businesses to start with a sustainable solutions. So we need some, eco-encouraging kind of policy, taxes, and just some kind of policies internalize the social cost into our internal cost. And that is a kind of reward for the business model first. And in that regard, the government or the intergovernmental, the guideline or agreement would be very effective. I was recently involved in compiling the APEC guideline for quality infrastructure. In the guideline, we define something which is a quality. The quality is not a simple quality, but it involves the societal, environmental, and also life cycle cost kind of perspective. So you do not focus just the initial cost and initial reward, but you should look forward more. And this is an intergovernmental agreement of the guideline, and this could push that kind of movement forward. And then eco-effectiveness. I think the word eco-effectiveness very much, I like very much, because eco-efficiency is just the ratio, it's a KPI. But eco-effectiveness, I believe, it means applicability, workability kind of, and performance-oriented kind of issue. So if you call it eco-effective, you can achieve something better, not only the performance itself, but you can earn a lot of money. At the same time, you can solve the societal issues at the same time. And in that case, you pointed out an example of auto manufacturers, and also you touched upon the reuse and recycling. And the material is very much energy intensive kind of product actually itself, like aluminum. It requires a lot of energy. And of course, the recycling is one of the key ideas. But we have to overcome the recycling issues of prohibition of cross-border import. We do our business usually in a global scale. So we sell something manufactured at another place, and we import it and sell it. If we do recycling, we have to do the reverse way. And those end-of-life materials or parts has to be re-imported cross-border. And in order to solve this, you know that there is a treaty prohibiting, in principle, those cross-boundary disposal import. But if we can agree on an appropriate standard to make sure that no bad effects will be happening, then that can be a very good effect to make the real reuse and recycling of the materials. And in that regards, I believe ISO TC207, as well as ICTC 111, those environmental people are working on that. And at the same time, of course, the manufacturers, global companies work on that to overcome these obstacles. And the second one I'd like to point out is, in order to make reuse or recycling more effective, we need to improve our design itself. So it's leading to our eco-design. And I believe that modern companies, advanced companies, globally active companies are very much eager to improve their design in terms of improving its recyclability. And it is in line with the European recent policy, circular economy. And I met with many government people, Japan, the United States, and European guides, and it looks like their governments are all sharing the same ideas of promoting circular economy to some extent. And I think it's our role, the industry, also contribute to or collaborate with those government policies to much more penetrated around the world.
So we see that actually we did a lot of work. There are a lot of guides, and of course we just promote what exists. But it seems that we still think into silos.
Yeah.
So okay, we have infrastructures in silos, but here we see that all of a sudden, if you want to do something useful, you need to think deeply on something. But the issue, and that's how human beings are wired, you think deeply, but you don't realize that you're just thinking deeper, deeper, deeper in the same direction. And somehow from the discussion we just had, and thanks to your experience, I realized that if we want to actually benefit from the energy content of anything we have and that we are using, and that we would like to be able to reuse, you might need to have some new work done to recognize the energy content of existing material, existing waste. If this is recognized, if this can be defined, you see, I guess it would be a completely different story to be able to actually have in place the appropriate mechanism to have those parts with their energy content recirculated throughout the world. Mm-hmm. And that would be a new source of energy savings, but that would be really starting into a sustainable, more circular economy. Sure. And now, what about the sharing economy? Mm-hmm. Where more and more we see incentives to, instead of owning a car, you're going to maybe just rent or pay to use it, or even for a washing machine or a TV set. Sure. What's the point owning a TV set? What's the point? And already you don't want to own a DVD anymore. If you want to watch a movie, you can just have it downloaded just when you want to see it. So what about those models of sharing economy? Do you see them starting to have an impact on eco-efficiency?
Yes, I believe so. It has started already posing its impact in a beneficial manner already, especially in the field of transportation. Of course, for example, the train and buses are shared by people, right? And for individual cars, there are increasing number of car sharing and carpooling movement around the world. I do not think it's pretty much common in the developing world, but in the United States or in Europe, these sharing and carpooling are much more penetrating. And one of my colleagues, which will follow maybe in the afternoon, Dr. Sakai, for example, he's dealing with smart transportation, and he's going to, I believe, work on some guidance for carpool. And that is one kind of manifestation. And at the same time, it will be applicable to everywhere. And it is also evidenced by the increased percentage of service industry within the total industry. And I think that in the advanced countries, almost 70% of the GDP the value created is by providing services, not providing the hardware or materials themselves. So even though a company is called a manufacturer, if we look into our activities of the company, 70% or more is coming from providing services. And this is very much in line with what you said. The usage side, the sharing or the function themselves are creating values. And the customers will buy the function, not buy the hardware themselves. And this is a big trend. And I think this is maybe economically initiated and promoted kind of movement, because the service sector is profitable than manufacturing sectors in general.
Right.
So people are going for more profitable business models. But this is maybe a coincidence, very good for keeping all the world's sustainable, because this service provision is more having the good benefit for reducing environmental impact. So I would like to encourage in order to increase your benefit, at the same time, reduce your environmental impact.
Thank you. And we see that we need to work much more on even what can be managed and measured. It's not just about the grams of CO2 or not just about kilowatt hours saved. And there might be some new metrics to find out. Yeah. You'll see that would characterize more the sustainability and the effectiveness. And now I'd like that we address the role of the buildings, actually, regarding energy, because buildings are using a big chunk of the overall energy produced, right?
They produce, in an urban environment, sometimes 50-60% of the energy is actually through the commercial building sector.
60% of the energy used is in the world is in the buildings.
In a highly dense urban center like Toronto,
Yeah.
commercial and institutional buildings are actually about 60% of the energy usage.
So whatever you do
overall in Canada, it's 25%.
So whatever you're going to do on the buildings, immediately you have a huge effect.
It has a very big effect, and as BOMA is the industry association for the commercial real estate, our industry is about the commercial part, which is about making money, creating value. A lot of properties now are owned by pension funds, life insurance companies, which use that to fund the pensions of Canadians. And the value of the property is directly related to the income generated by that property. So if you can reduce essentially $1 in expense, that generally relates to $10 to $20 in increased asset value. So you see the reason why we focus very much on reducing expenses, reducing energy. Energy is waste. You know, everything we don't have to spend on energy, we can then pay out to our investors.
So that's very interesting because that's a good example of how the control loop is closed to get some decision made. And of course, it's easy to make decisions at the scale of a building. And of course, what we're looking for now is having decisions made at the scale of cities, right? Mm-hmm. But then at the scale of a building, which could be considered as very large buildings, could be considered as micro cities, right? But it's interesting to see that technology allows to do many, many things. The key is to be able to decide quickly and close the loop on the value proposition. And basically, you have on hand those capabilities, is a building per building. And what's the potential, actually, of the improving buildings to contribute to smart cities objectives?
In terms of reducing energy, in Canada we run a building certification and assessment program called BOMA Best. Some of our best buildings in that program, while the average Canadian commercial building would use approximately 30 equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot per year, the best buildings are running at 10, which is about 66% less than the average commercial building. So there's a massive potential to reduce energy. Massive potential of most of our commercial buildings in Toronto, for instance. We've had a couple of incidents that happened. For instance, today in Toronto, the heat index will be about 44. It's not always cold in Canada. And so all the commercial buildings are actually connected with our local utility into a demand management system. They will all automatically, based on signals from the system, immediately reduce the consumption so that our peak will be shaved. We've had cases where we had a major urban flood in Toronto 5 years ago, and we lost one of 2 transformer stations coming in. And again, the grid and the cooperation we have with the utility was that immediately all the commercial real estate went into demand management, reduced consumption, and by that stabilized the grid, and we didn't have a blackout. If we didn't do that, we would have actually had the entire city go out. So we have implemented things on a citywide scale because we know we're interdependent. And even our financial district now has gotten together and saying that we need to become, as a city within the city, more resilient and more sustainable. And global financial companies are actually starting to ask those questions as they move into a city. Do I have reliable power, reliable buildings? Can my people get to work, et cetera?
So that's very interesting because we see that there are opportunities to actually leverage from innovations, but there are also risks where, of course, by coupling different verticals or different looking for synergies, you might actually build in some dependencies in between infrastructure.
We have a lot of, we're obviously dependent on the utilities.
And then, of course, there are huge opportunities, but we need to be extremely careful about the interdependencies and the risk that can occur by something happening in one of the vertical, and that it should not propagate to others. Or for the characteristics of energy, I mean, if you can have some savings, you can have very coefficient solutions, but you have to be careful not to damage the reliability, and the other way around neither.
Well, there are a lot of technological solutions that the industry implements. Yet the industry is also very conservative in that there's a lot of promises being made about technologies that sometimes don't pan out. And if you put in a technology if you spend a lot of money on technology and you don't get the savings, you're probably not going to be working there very much longer. So there's that conservative element. And yet at the same time, we also notice that it's not simply technology, it's technology and management practices that are key. And so while there's the trend to put sensors everywhere, if those sensors aren't cleaned, maintained, and calibrated on a regular basis, the information coming in is worthless. And those, if you're not actually what we call recommissioning your building on a regular basis, you don't get the energy savings you anticipate.
We hear a lot about the net zero energy buildings. So what is it about? Is it going to deploy massively?
We already have a number of buildings in Canada, and typically it's a country with very cold weather, so we can actually have that. We're working actually with the Natural Resources Canada, a department of the federal government, in actually developing a KPI on how to determine what a net zero energy building will be, and to develop an award system across the country to actually celebrate people as they move towards net zero.
I see. I see. And how impactful is a cross-sectorial approach dealing with energy, light, hot, cold, air, quality, water, telecommunication? Do you have one example to share?
It's absolutely key for our industry. We're connected with all the utilities, all the transportation agencies, et cetera. If people can't get to work, our buildings are useless. They're places, but they require people to get there, for instance. So it's extremely important that we do things on with all levels of government to ensure that our properties are maximized, that people get to work, that they're comfortable. Of course, you always have things, and everybody knows that. Everybody wants to work in a building that's comfortable. Comfortable generally means you want the air a little bit cooler, you want lots of fresh air, but those take energy. So, the best, the most energy efficient building is one that you seal completely. Unfortunately, you don't want to work in there because the air is going to get very stale very quickly.
So today, is it easy to find on the market all the technology bricks ready to be used to actually implement your projects?
I think the technology is out there. What I think the key thing that stops a lot of implementation of certain technologies is, one, it might be new, but the other is the sort of vendor-specific sort of backbone you have to put in for certain ones. We'd like to be like your plumbing system. You can buy anybody's taps because the pipes are going to work with everybody's. Right now, you don't know. There's a lot of, in the past, where people have implemented, we're going to call building automation systems, et cetera, but they were very vendor-specific. And if you wanted to change, you suddenly found out it was very, very expensive. So what you need is a very neutral backbone, essentially an IP telecommunications utility, just like your mechanical systems, your plumbing systems, your heating systems.
So, and also when you think you have this neutral backbone, you never know what you're going to have to face and what you want to add after the facts. So it's very tricky, right, to say, okay, this is the one, and it is open to sustain for forever.
And that's why you need the standards, I think.
And this is where there is still a huge effort, coordinated effort in between the major SDOs to come up all together, I guess, with a solution to this, because I said earlier it's difficult to have decisions made. I guess this is one key reason why people are not investing, because they see too many, there are too many things that looks like the same, almost the same smart meters, the same communication systems, almost the same, but they are not exactly the same. Then it's urgent for the investors to do nothing, right?
In many cases, and the early technologies, there was a lot of promises, and some of them didn't pan out, and so everybody becomes a little bit more cautious.
Now, I'd like to have a last question for our panelists just before we enter in answering some questions. You've been kind enough to pass up to the podium, and the question is very simple. A city will not be smart just because we have implemented a lot of exciting technology, right? It's going to be smart only if it's enhancing the capability to put the citizens at the center of the city, right? So, yeah, we cannot make the human beings happy despite themselves. So, the human beings, they have the needs, right? Aspirations, emotions, and some are explicit, a lot are implicit. What would you suggest to involve them, to involve the citizens in the design, operation, and the management of a smart city that would be an energy champion? Just if we have a statement in a nutshell so that we enter in the Q&A.
Okay. I think that the citizens at the center, of course, it's a key. We have to achieve this real involvement of citizens and residents in two ways. One is standard development. Usually the ISO/IEC ITUT standards may include the participation of the citizens. However, in this specific topic, smart city, we need to put our effort more to invite the citizens into a discussion. This is one thing. And the second one is much more operational basis. We can make the smart infrastructure in such a way that can absorb, get feedback from citizens much more compared to a conventional way. Not that kind of statistic 1 year average, but very much frequent, like every minute, or much more precise granularity, like individual kind of. Of course, keeping privacy. But if we get this kind of feedback every time, then our infrastructure can be, of course, smart and more fitted to the real demand. And this is the second option. This is what I would like to propose.
Thank you. Mr. Glass, what do you think?
To me, the key thing really is that we have to use technology as the enabler and not technology as the be-all and end-all for smart cities. I think sometimes we put technology in front without understanding why we're putting the technology there. I think you need a more holistic view.
Okay.
For instance, meetings we had with the Ministry of Health here in Singapore, they're right now reviewing the implementation of something like telemedicine. And while we understand the benefits in a rural area, in a very dense urban area, it actually might be more expensive and less sustainable. So they're actually having that debate. So that's why I think like maybe initiative like what the ITU and the UNEC are doing now, the United for Smart Sustainable Cities, which is that can we get a measurement of a more holistic view of a city in terms of its smartness and sustainability.
Mr. Zulu?
I think my view is radical, I think. It's really no more about just educating the citizens or talking to them. Let's look at what's happening. This is a reality. These guys are generating their own electricity. That's what is happening as we speak. They're storing their own electricity as we speak. They are able to sell electricity amongst each other. As we speak, that's what is happening right now. So I think it goes beyond just educating. We need to partner with them. We need to be able to sit back and be able to allow them to trade. I'm sure someone will come up with some Ubering of electricity or Airbnb, for instance. So I think we need to just go beyond just educating. We need to partner with the citizens, make sure that we start providing a service. It's no more about just delivering kilowatt hours to them and be able to get them to use it. So the narrative has to change. And it has to change very quickly for us not to be extinct.
So basically, they are not just poor customers at the end of the chain, and that we should be nice to them. They are just players.
Certainly, otherwise.
And they have to be at the table.
They have to.
Fantastic.
So let's partner with them.
Yeah, fantastic. So I'd like to move. I received a few questions. I received 3 questions up to now. So the first question is regarding the Moore's law that was reminded by Dr. Tan here, that pushed us to the limits of physics. And that means now that we have big data. Okay, that's great. A lot of data, but what are we doing with the data? And the question is how EDF, well, that's the company I'm working for, an electric utility, or how Hitachi or how the city power of Joburg are using this data. Do we have concrete examples of actionable insights we got from data? So I can just start mentioning something that actually EDF Group has been doing with the city of Singapore, with the Housing Development Board, where we have been coming up with a platform where we have been modeling the Yuhua area that was on one of your slides, and we've been coming up with a kind of 3D presentations of a lot of different characteristics of the cities. And based on the KPIs, we are providing actually a computer-aided decision tool where basically the staff from the Housing Development Board, they can say, hey, if we decide to install PV panels there, or fuel cells, or greenery on those buildings, what will be the impact on energy cost, of course, and on the KPIs of the city? And it's very interesting because you can play dynamically with this tool before making the actual decisions. And what's interesting here, I'm not talking about just the 3D visualization where they are world champion about ICT, but it's about the know-how that has been embedded in that tool. And basically, if EDF Group has been able to do this, it's because we have decades of experience of decisions and effect on usage and performance on whatever energy. So that's one example, and of course we keep working on this. We keep working on a lot of analytics, on artificial intelligence, deep learning, things you can add to this, because the point is that we start having this platform helping making decisions, but it's not enough. What we want to do is being able to monitor on the long run what's going on and monitor the characteristics on the long run, because very often what you observe is that with very complex system, actually the key performance are drifting very, very slowly. And this drift cannot be detected by a human operator. But data analysis helps to detect this and to be able to act very early on for key maintenance to make sure we keep getting the performance that we got at the commissioning. And also, very often, you learn that through this drift, there is something going on in the aging, early aging of something. So that's one example. I don't know if you have one key example. Otherwise, we can just move to the next question. But
I mean, if you look at
one, okay, go ahead.
Seripa, for instance, through data analytics, we've managed to reduce some of the non-technical losses with the smart meter deployment, etc. So it changes the way we do business in a way, and we're in a position to be able to segment our customers, etc. So I think there's a lot really that you can do. You can really carry on, and we've reaped some of the benefits as we speak as a utility.
We have any one?
Yes.
One example?
One example is that we have not completed yet, but some project is already going on to utilize city data for multiple usage. You know, the data itself can be a value. And the city level, we have an abundant of data. It's a big data. But it can be used differently. Like a transportation data can be used for the dwelling, housing, planning, or another purposes like the placement of the market stores. And so if we can share those data value with multiple different sectors, that is a very nice model, and also a new business will arise. But we have to overcome a policy issue as well, like keeping privacies and who owns the data kind of issues. But I think this is already started, and it's a very good start utilizing this kind of big data.
Excellent. So let's pass. And I have well, I can group some questions. You see, there are some questions around what should regulators put in place to help cities move forward?
Oh.
Kind of also, what are the mechanisms we can use to reward the investors? It's a bit connected to this. So, so basically, on this question, I guess we've been touching upon along the discussion where I guess we should not look at regulators as just being the one at the end of the chain, at one end of the chain, right? And they need to be at the table.
Yeah.
They'll be very, very early on, right? And now a key question, which is how can we drive synergy and collaboration or standardization between smart cities vertical and the many standardization organizations? And actually there is definitely such gathering is a very first step. And the first thing is to discuss, definitely, to find out what we already all have and what we can share. And I guess that the system approach that has been started to be implemented is definitely the way to organize the discussion and really create conditions so that each organization can come up with the best they can offer without asking the organizations to do allegiance to each other. So and this is my wish, and that will be the final word for this panel, my hope, and I want you to thank very much here our exclusive panel and all the insights that have been provided. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the panelists. We know a lot of questions have been raised and not answered. The coffee break upstairs on the 5th floor, where I'm told it's better coffee than here on the 4th floor, is available for those who want to take a walk, because we know you've been patient for 2+ hours in one seat. So we encourage you to take a 15, 20-minute break. There'll be a bell upstairs to remind you to come back, because we have our second panel of the morning to hear about the same agenda in the water context. And so please take a moment. You're welcome to stay here, of course, if you don't need a bio break or a coffee break, but we will be back in this room for our water panel. We don't want to miss any of you, so thanks to starting us in the deep dive in energy, and next is the deep dive in water after your break. Thank you all. We'll be back soon.
Thank you.